take a look at it, pray about it, and decide if you'd like to support us and in what way, to what level. Also, want to ask you all, please subscribe to this channel and share it. When you like and subscribe to this, what this does is it affects the algorithms on YouTube, and it actually does, the more subscribers and the more likes and so forth that we get, it actually helps YouTube push this out to more people and recommend it to more people. And really, that's the goal of the U.S. Grace Force, is to grow this force of God's grace to reach as many lives as possible, especially with what we see going on in our world right now. So we're going to really encourage you out there to subscribe, like, share this with as many people as you can. And also, one last thing, don't forget to check out, link below, U.S. Grace Force gear. Go to our official gear page, check out the t-shirts we have. We've got this fantastic Under God t-shirt. We really want as many people as possible to wear this of all denominations, but let's join forces, grab yourself one of these shirts through our gear page, and let's really remind the world how important it is that we place this nation under God in all ways. And also this image right here, check this out, I kneel for God alone. How important it is right now that we make that point clear that I kneel for God alone. I will not kneel before the mob rule, this agenda, this Marxist agenda that's out there right now trying to destroy so many things in our world that are good, destroy the church, destroy our country, destroy other nations. So get yourself an I kneel before God alone t-shirt. And again, make that point clear. The scripture on the back makes that point clear that I kneel before God because He is Almighty. So, check these pages out. And thank you so much for everything. Father, back to you.
Yeah, so, Michael, I've watched you from afar, but then we joined that secret Facebook group that we have. You know, I went today and I checked. It's 2015. That's 5 years we've been doing that. But there's it's not a big group, but it's a lot of people that they'd recognize the names of the people that are in this group. And what do we talk about? Prophecy, you know? And I think 2015 was a big year where a lot of people were talking about prophecy. You know, you had ISIS and everything going on, and everybody felt the world was in crisis at that time. And certainly feel it right now. But I want to give a quick little bio for Michael. He's amazing. He's a warrior, okay? He's the president of the Lepanto Institute. He's been a well-known public figure in the pro-life movement, and he has spent 7.5 years as American Life League's director and of the Defend the Faith project. In addition to his work with Defend the Faith, Michael hosted the online video series, The American Life League Report. So this popular video series features exposés and explanations of the culture of death and its work in our country and our church, which we're going to talk about a lot of that tonight. He's prior to his work with the American Life League, Michael helped open 2 Catholic schools in Fredericksburg, Virginia, and he holds a Bachelor of Arts degree from Christendom College in Political Science and Economics and a Master's degree in Education from American Intercontinental University. And Michael lives in Virginia with his wife Alyssa and their 5 children. So we're really excited to have you tonight, Michael. You know, and the topic, and people can see right there, Catholics Rise Up. Michael, what's your take on what's going on in the culture right now?
Oh boy. Well, quite honestly, this what's happening right now is nothing short of a Marxist revolt.
Right.
Everything that I am seeing and that we are witnessing taking place through all of these riots and all these lootings, they have been designed, planned, and orchestrated and are now being executed with great precision. Back in the 1920s, there was a book that was written called Reds in America, and the book itself was primarily a publication of communist documents that were obtained by I think it was Minnesota police during a communist raid, and they published all of these plans for creating riots and especially race riots. And in 1924 is when this book was published.
Oh.
And they were talking about using racism in the United States in order to drive a wedge so that they could destabilize, so that they could then start to break down the relations of the local people with the police departments, to create what they thought was going to be some sort of implementation of a police state, and then
presumptive Democratic nominee for president.
This self-proclaimed practicing Catholic stands firmly against church teaching on virtually every issue.
My religion defines who I am, and I've been a practicing Catholic my whole life.
The 77-year-old Democrat favors killing babies in the womb.
I support Roe. I support a woman's right to choose under that constitutional guaranteed provision. And quite frankly, I always will.
Along with his support for abortion, so-called gay marriage has his full support as well.
I am absolutely comfortable with the fact that men marrying men, women marrying women, and heterosexual men and women marrying men all are entitled to the same exact rights, all the civil rights, all the civil liberties. And quite frankly, I don't see much of a distinction.
In 2016, he officiated a gay wedding himself, and then tweeted about how happy he was to marry the two Obama White House staffers at the U.S. Naval Observatory. Joseph Robinette Biden Jr. grew up in the blue-collar city of Scranton, Pennsylvania, where his father paid the bills cleaning furnaces and selling used cars. He attended Catholic school and eventually went on to the University of Delaware, receiving his bachelor's degree in 1965, and then moved on to Syracuse University, where he got his law degree in '68. 4 years later, in 1972, Biden became the fifth youngest senator elected in American history. Senator Biden was expected to be a champion of the middle class, hearkening back to his own roots.
Well, I'm not sure you should assume I'm not corrupt, but thank you for that, though.
But as his career extended, the middle class became less and less a concern for him until he actually embarked on a path of policy support which would attack those same blue-collar types he came from. Today, American workers are still paying the price.
I went to cover a rally in Battle Creek, Michigan in December of 2019, and this was frigid temperatures. It's maybe 10, 12 degrees when we got there. But when we got there early, we went up front around midnight the night before, and we saw that there was already a line of people waiting out at the rally for President Trump. And so I brought my camera guy, and we were talking to people in line. I said, what makes you guys want to wait out in this kind of weather for, any politician? And of the first people I spoke to, almost all of them were union workers, people who had worked in the auto plants or other manufacturing plants in the Michigan area, and they all told me that they were there for one reason, and that was because they supported Donald Trump on the issue of trade with China and the issue of bringing jobs back to America.
The United States has economic and trade relations with certain countries it deems most favored nation. MFN status establishes equality of trading opportunity among states by guaranteeing that if one country is given better trade terms by another, then all other states must get the same terms. This is a map of all 164 members of the World Trade Organization. All these members receive most favored nation trade status. Important to note, Communist China, with untold human rights violations and abuses, including torture and state-sponsored murder, is on the list. As a historical contrast, Congress was still debating granting the status to the former Soviet Union less than 1 month before its collapse and dissolution. Communist Russia, who had battled the U.S. for decades through the Cold War and constant threat of nuclear engagement, had been denied that status until they essentially no longer existed. Not so Communist China, and that communist nation has Joe Biden to thank. On June 25, 1991, Senate Majority Leader George Mitchell, a Democrat from Maine, proposed a bill that would renew most favored nation trade status for China. It was simply China's communist ideology that resulted in its exclusion from the list, the same principle that had been continually applied to the Soviet Union.
The specific subject of which is the question of extending most favored nation tariff treatment to the export products of the People's Republic of China. But the larger subject of this debate is the American national interest in the world. The long-range goals and best interests of our own nation should rest at the heart of any debate on foreign trade or foreign policy.
For well over 3 decades, China had been forcing abortions on mothers who had more than one child. Their one-child policy was put in place, quote, so the rate of population growth may be brought under control as soon as possible, close quote. All through the Senate deliberations, China maintained the one-child policy. It only recently changed in the last few years.
China has abandoned its controversial one-baby policy, allowing couples to have 2 children for the first time in decades.
The 1991 bill to give China Most Favored Nation status was a proposal that had little to no support from either party. Democrat Senator Biden from Delaware was one of the lone voices in support.
And so I will take a few moments now, Mr. President, if I may, to try to point out why I think the Mitchell proposal is both reasonable and practicable.
Biden spearheaded this campaign for the next decade, and in 2001, the United States granted China its long-sought permanent trade status. Since then, according to the Economic Policy Institute, the U.S. has lost just under 4 million jobs to China, about 2.5% of all American employment. Most of these jobs are blue-collar manufacturing jobs, resulting in the abandonment of factories and plants all over the Midwest, in an area which used to be called the Steel Belt. But once economic ruin set in, the Steel Belt turned into the Rust Belt.
He's also said quite ridiculously, quite laughably, that a stronger China is better for the United States in terms of jobs. And that simply flies in the face of reality. You look at places like Michigan, like Wisconsin, like Western Pennsylvania, like Ohio, Minnesota, all of these places that have lost jobs to outsourcing, have lost jobs to China. This has been endemic to these areas, and you can drive across them and you can see the shuttered factories. You can see what China's done to the steel industry over the past decades. And Joe Biden, of course, has been in the driver's seat of all of that. And so for Joe Biden to say that it's actually good for American workers is quite possibly one of the most laughable things anyone said in American politics in terms of foreign relations.
Today, since American companies are now free to offshore jobs to China for lowering manufacturing and labor costs, American workers lose, and the Chinese Communist Party gets a financial windfall in the form of trillions of American dollars invested into China. Over $560 billion worth of goods came into the U.S. from China in 2018. This makes up more than 21% of the value of all goods the U.S. imported. In 2005, the average Chinese factory worker earned about $9.50 a day. Today, although wages have increased, it's only about $27.50 a day for Chinese factory workers. By comparison, in the U.S., the average American manufacturing wage is over $180 per day. In terms of hourly wage, the American makes about $23 an hour. In China, a worker there makes a little more than $3 an hour, and even that comes with a caveat. Chinese workers are often forced into sweatshop-type settings where 8-hour workdays are a myth. They often are forced to work double those hours 7 days a week. Along with millions of American jobs being given to China's cheap labor force, the quality of American products also gets destroyed. So the Americans out of work can't even purchase the low-quality products made in China for them. For all of this, we have blue-collar, middle-class Joe Biden to thank.
So he knows who the Chinese Communist Party is and who their leaders are. He knows very well. That being said, his entire career, Joe Biden has worked to promote these trade relations with China, and he's been putting dollars and profits before people.
Along with handing millions of American manufacturing jobs to China, in an attempt to fight so-called man-made climate change and convert the American coal and fossil fuel-based economy to an environment-friendly eco-economy,
I'm announcing my plan for a clean energy revolution.
Biden has committed publicly to simply wiping out tens of thousands more American jobs.
As president, would you be willing to sacrifice some of that growth, even knowing potentially that it could displace thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of blue-collar workers in the interest of transitioning to that greener economy?
The answer is yes.
Another demographic Biden claims to serve is black America.
But I tell you, if you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, then you ain't black.
It don't have nothing to do with Trump.
That's kind of the hubris that Joe Biden has for him to come in as an affluent, white, liberal, a guy who's been in Washington, D.C. for years and years, almost 4 decades. But he's going to come in and tell the black community what's good for them, not turn around and listen to them and say, I hear your concerns, we're going to do better. And keep in mind that he's been in federal government throughout this entire period of time that the black community has said that they haven't received what they wanted from government, that they haven't seen the kind of outcomes that they'd like. They're talking about issues of policing in the community. Joe Biden has been there every single step of the way for the last 4 decades.
As vice president for 8 years under the first black president, Obama and Biden did nothing but help further destroy the black community by breaking down the family structure, a process begun in the 1960s. About 13% of the United States is black, and yet 40% of all abortions are performed on black women. Planned Parenthood, the leading abortion provider in the U.S., kills well over 1/3 babies every year, which translates to 138,000 black babies wiped out from American society in 1 year, every year. This shouldn't come as a surprise to anybody, as 2010 census results showed that Planned Parenthood targets minority neighborhoods. 79% of its surgical abortion facilities are located within walking distance of African American or Hispanic Latino neighborhoods. One of Biden's biggest pieces of legislation was the 1994 crime bill he signed alongside Bill Clinton, which is to this day the largest crime bill in U.S. history. This bill is a huge success in the eyes of Biden.
You ashamed of that bill?
Not at all. And in fact, I drafted the bill, if you remember.
I know that.
The bill that was supposed to make America safer has received plenty of backlash. Backlash not exclusive to the Republican Party.
That 1994 crime bill, it did contribute to mass incarceration in our country.
Mass incarceration was a huge mistake. The crime bill was a huge mistake.
Likewise, in the recent debates, firebrand Kamala Harris went after Biden over his busing stance back in the 1970s and 80s.
You also worked with them to oppose busing.
With the 2020 election less than 5 months away, it's Donald Trump versus Joe Biden. It's pro-life versus pro-death.
And above all, we know that every human soul is divine and every human life, born and unborn, is made in the holy image of Almighty God.
One president that we have currently has consistently appointed pro-life justices. We know, based on his history and everything that he's done throughout his career, that Joe Biden is going to appoint more radical left-wing justices. And so if you're out there and you're someone who's a Catholic, I think that, yes, of course, the politics of the day and the news of the day are always going to be very inflamed, and there's always going to be a lot of heated rhetoric. But I think as Catholics, we're called to look deeper and we're called to look further, to look into the eternal. And so if we're going to be looking that deeply and that further into the policies of how we run our nation, the kind of nation that, I've got a young child of my own, what kind of nation our children are going to grow up in, that's something that I think is going to be a lot more important than the short term.